Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Irfan Yar. I'm the founder and managing director of Afghanistan Security Institute, and I will be your moderator for this session. Before I introduce my distinguished panelists, I would like to thank CGS team for organizing this very vital conference at this critical moment. And more importantly, I want to take the liberty and on behalf of my foreign colleagues, thank the people of Bangladesh for welcoming, especially you, the audience, for your generosity and very friendly behavior toward us. So we deeply appreciate that. In this session, we will be exploring a very critical topic.
I have no idea, but go ahead.
The human cost of progress, right, is pillars of sustainable development. What is progress if it sacrifices human dignity? Gentlemen and ladies, for this topic, we have esteemed speaker with us, Datuk Zuraida Kamaruddin, former Minister of Plantation and Commodities, Malaysia. We have David Morris, CEO in Australia-China Business Council. We have with us Gwen Lewis, UN Resident Coordinator in Bangladesh. Ishrat Hussain, Research Fellow, German Institute for Global and Area Studies. And finally, we have Sheikh Mohammed Daniel, Director, Sonali Life Insurance, Bangladesh. Let me start with you, Ishrat. How the theme of human cost of development applies to the case of Bangladesh, especially when it comes to the marginalized groups and community. So if you can shed a brief light on that. And just a reminder, you will have 5 minutes. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Irfan. Before I start, I just want to quickly thank CGS and the Friedrich Ebert Foundation for hosting this important event. And as a Bangladeshi, I also want to pay my respect to the martyrs and the victims of the July-August uprising. I think it's because of their bravery that we are able to come here and talk openly about different issues. To answer your question, Irfan, I just want to quickly start by underlining that most often than not, the human cost of development and progress is borne by the most marginalized and underprivileged communities, such as the indigenous people in many cases, as we have seen in the Brazilian indigenous population in the Amazonian forest, and also the tribal groups in the Indian hinterlands. In the case of Bangladesh, I want to highlight the situation in the Chittagong Hill Tracts region and how the development has impacted adversely the indigenous population of that area. So just a little bit of context for the non-Bangladeshis. The Chittagong Hill Tracts region sits along the southeastern border of Bangladesh, and it has borders with India, the northeastern states of India, mainly Mizoram and Tripura, and it also has some border with the Chin state of Myanmar. So it is a vast and sparsely populated area of Bangladesh. It encompasses around 11% of the total landmass of Bangladesh, but it only has around 1% of Bangladesh's population. So you can understand that this is a strikingly underpopulated area if we compare that to the other densely populated parts of Bangladesh. So the CHT is inhabited by both Bengalis and non-Bengalis. And by non-Bengalis, I mean indigenous groups who are more culturally and linguistically similar to the highlanders from Myanmar and Indian northeastern region. And there are around 12 groups that inhabit in the Hill Tracts area. So historically, the CHT has been seen as an underdeveloped region, and there has been many attempts in the last 60 years to develop the hills, to bring development to the hills. And as part of this development agenda, in the early 1960s, a massive hydroelectric dam project was introduced, and this project was use the Kornofuli River, which is situated in the Rangamati district. And because of this hydroelectric project, around 40% of irrigable land of the hill tracts went underwater, and 100,000 people were displaced, who were mainly the Chakma population. So we can see that the first substantial cost of development in the hill tracts was borne by the indigenous population. And some scholars also argue that this project and its consequences kind of sow the initial seeds of discontent among the indigenous population, which eventually, gave rise to the armed conflict within that region. So as we can see in this case of Chittagong Hill Tracts, the nexus between indigenous rights and development is not only there, but there is also a nexus between development and conflict. So after this incident, in the subsequent decades, the region was also seen some different types of development, especially since the signing of the peace accord in 1997. For example, in the last 3 decades, we have seen different types of industrial and agricultural projects, such as rubber plantation, tobacco plantation, and industrial fruit production, that have led to deforestation, eviction of indigenous population, and ecological imbalance. At the same time, development has also come in the form of infrastructure development. And by this, I don't mean infrastructure which comprises of roads and bridges, but there has been a massive expansion of domestic tourism sector, which has required this region to produce a lot of facilities. And many of these resorts and other facilities that were made in the CHT were often done on indigenous land, sometimes evicting communities from areas where they have been living for generations. One recent example of this, and a prominent one, has been the 2021 project that came into the surface of Marriott Hotel building a 5-star resort in the Chimbuk Hills of Bandarban. And this project was a collaboration between a business conglomerate of Bangladesh, the infrastructure division of the Bangladesh Army, and the Marriott Hotel Group. So this project raised a lot of concerns within the indigenous community because if it was implemented, it was going to evict around 500 families, and it was going to indirectly or directly affect the larger Mro community. So there was a strong resistance from the Mro people. They took to the streets and organized human chains and cultural shutdowns, so different types of activities to raise awareness against this project and also to resist the building of this hotel. So this instance, this resistant somehow successfully shelved this project, but in most cases, this success is not replicated in other instances. So to summarize, the Bangladeshi case, I think, shows some of the pitfalls of development, especially industrial, agriculture, and infrastructural development on indigenous populated areas. But that does not mean that development is not important. It is necessary and important, as we have seen in other parts of Bangladesh. However, a more inclusive planning and implementation process where all stakeholders are invited and their voices are heard, I think that will create a more meaningful and sustainable development for all parties. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ishrat, for your insight. Now let me come to you, Ms. Kamaruddin. Malaysia's palm oil industry significantly contribute to your national economy. However, there are growing concerns about environmental degradation and labor rights violation. So my question to you is, how can Malaysia palm oil sector balance economic growth with addressing human rights and environmental concerns? The floor is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wassalatu wassalam wala asyrafil mursalin wala alihi wasahbihi ajma'in. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah, before that, Irfan, I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me for this event, and my dear panelists as well. And also I would like to congratulate the new government, and I'm glad to be here to be sharing some of our experience so that the new government and the Yunus will somehow take off at the right time and at the right policies and that kind of thing. So I was the Minister of Plantation Industries and Commodities of Malaysia, and one of the commodities that I take care of in my portfolio was palm oil, for that matter. Palm oil is our largest export crop, and we're the second largest producing country of palm oil after Indonesia. So what is our role in this palm oil industry, where it's a global commodity? We have conducted a lot of researches. We comply with all the necessary scientific researches and so on and so forth. So much so, our quality of our palm oil is equivalent to the Round Table Sustainable Palm Oil, and ours is called Malaysia Sustainable Palm Oil. But on top of that also, we comply with deforestation, we comply with COP26 or COP29 now, and the other value of sustainability. But what we are concerned now, because I think some of you might be aware, but the palm oil of Malaysia has this, facing this campaign against anti-palm oil campaign by the US government. And this is, we find it is very unfair, and it's not a fair evaluation of our country, because Malaysia, of course, is different from US. US do not grow palm oil. They grow rapeseed, soya oil, plus probably corn oil, but they don't grow palm oil. So they shouldn't be imposing the values and the style of work and the culture of the United States work culture on our Malaysian plantation, because we were charged with something like forced labor, child labor, whereas this doesn't happen actually if you come down to the ground and take a look at how our plantation works, because 40% of our plantation is being managed by smallholders. So they have their plantation, and that's where their homes are. When their homes are there, where do the children play? The children play, their playground is the plantation. So if there's one complaint that goes to the CBP, the Custom Protection Border of US, to say that they charge us for child labor, they didn't understand there's the children, there's the playground of the children where the parents are owning this plantation. So what really irks us in Malaysia then was, for one complaint, they will sanction our products from entering US, yeah, for one complaint, and this complaint without verification, without coming down to the ground, and they don't give the time limit for the kind of sanction and when are they going to release our products. So until when I was the minister then, I made an effort to meet up with the CBP to give them the understanding, the kind of plantation that we grow and the kind of work style and the kind of culture that we have in Malaysia, which they have never seen. So this is something that I felt is bullying tactics, where they impose on their values to our plantation and palm oil production. And this campaign is being engineered and being sponsored to some NGOs who campaign for us against our palm oil product. So much so, when I met up with the high officials of CBP, so I made them come to Malaysia and take a look at our plantation so that they have better understanding how we run our plantation. And you're talking about deforestation. Our palm oil grow as old as up to 40 years before we do replanting. But the power policies, we stop at 25 years, we replant. as compared to rapeseed and so on and so forth, they are animal crop farming actually. Every year they have to clear up and they have to do their replanting. And also when talking about deforestation, Malaysia maintains 50% of forest reserve as compared to the US only 15%. So why are they imposing this on us? Whereas I think what I'm trying to bring about here is that I hope that countries like Bangladesh with a new democracy and they are coming forward now with new policies, make sure that you are involved and make them understand your work culture and your lifestyle and things that they don't have in America, for instance. And for example, my palm oil, we don't grow palm oil in America, so they have to have a better standing before they come out with some imposition of some policies on sanctioning the products. Yeah. So for UK, for instance, Ferrero Rocher, Cadbury, they have palm oil in their products. Yeah. So these are I think, inaccurate allegations against our Malaysian palm oil, where we comply with all the necessary sustainable policies, sustainable agreement. So we feel that it's high time that countries who are, so-called the advanced countries or the superpowers, they have to understand the values and the lifestyle of us in the Asian regions, especially the developing countries, so that they will take into consideration what is it that we are different, what are the difference between us and them and the policies, the way we work, and they can incorporate it fairly when they assess our products or they want to sanction our products from entering the country. So much so, as a minister then, I moved my marketing strategy to the Eastern Bloc, because I see the Eastern Bloc is very more familiar. We are quite the same in terms of culture, we are in terms of our living, our eating styles and our menu. So I moved to the Eastern countries with big population, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh. So these are the people that should be consuming our palm oil, which is of no lesser standards than the soya oil and so on and so forth. So then we shall concentrate. At the same time, we will try to counter the campaign against palm oil. And why I mention this, why it costs, the human cost, because the livelihood of the planters of the plantation, I said 40% of our producers of palm oil are coming from the small holders, which is a privately owned plantations by individuals. Okay, so that's their livelihood. About 2 million of our population is involved in this industry. Yeah, so therefore, if it's being sanctioned, these people, they will miss their income, and the children will also miss their livelihood going to school and so on and so forth. So we don't need this sort of human cost which is being fabricated. So it's not necessary actually. But if they come to terms and understand the kind of lifestyle, the kind of work we do in our plantation in Malaysia. So I hope that it could be a lesson to Bangladesh, for any products in future that you are caught in this situation. I think you have to view it and look into it, and so that you are being assessed fairly, not on one-sided. Yeah,
Thank you very much, Qamaruddin. And I totally get your point that unfortunately the West failed to see things from other perspective, which raise a lot of concerns, when it comes to bilateral relation. Gwen Lewis, one of the most important steps that the UN has taken was the Sustainable Developmental Goals. I think these goals are not just a global agenda, but a blueprint for transforming, the future of planet and the people who are most vulnerable. And my question to you is why addressing right is key to advancing the Sustainable Developmental Goals, and what areas could be focused on in Bangladesh to achieve these goals? Thank you.
Thank you, Irfan.
To Gwen Lewis.
Yes. For me. Thank you. Thank you very much, and it's really a pleasure and an honor to be here with all of you today. And the question of human rights in terms of Bangladesh's development, I think, is a very interesting one, given what has happened over the past months in the country with the protests and the revolution and the change in government and now the interim government in place. I think Secretary General Kofi Annan very famously said that there is no human rights without development and no development without human rights. And I think what the students were protesting over the summer really illustrated that when they were calling for rights to equal access to jobs in the civil service and to be treated as equal citizens. And so I think really taking into account human rights in development is critical, and there's various aspects I'd like to touch on today. Maybe first to talk about Bangladesh's incredible achievements in terms of alleviating poverty and achievements in terms of development. It's been outstanding. When you look at the numbers in 2020, when close to 50% of the population was under the poverty line, and then you look at those numbers in 2022 when it's less than 20%, it really shows these enormous steps. But when you look more at the granular data and you really understand that there's certain pockets of the communities that are left out and where rights become very critical. One example was during COVID, when a proportion of the population fell into the new poor income challenges because of the lockdown and because of their loss of savings. So that would be one category. Another category is the group of people that are impacted by income disparities. What we're seeing with this very positive GDP growth is not necessarily equal growth, and so there is increased disparity across the country, and having policies to tackle those disparities is really key, that take into account the rights of every citizen. Another is inflation, and really tackling inflation is critical right now in Bangladesh, given the high rates and the fact that some people are very badly affected. So thinking beyond growth and GDP is really critical, because there's multidimensional aspects of vulnerability, and it's important that no groups are left behind. And we already heard about the Chittagong Hill Tracks, but also women is another group, or the marginalized community across the country. The other aspect of promotion of human rights is ensuring that human rights organizations and civil society have a voice. And I think there was a lot of conversations about civil society organizations not being able to work in Bangladesh out of fear of repression or not being able to register. But it's really key, if development is to advance and for Bangladesh to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, for there to be a government that's held accountable by civil society organizations, and that's responsive and open and transparent. That this will also help address some of the concerns and the economic inequalities, but also give voice so that tensions don't build in the society and they're addressed and people are treated equally. Another area where we've seen this quite prominently over the last weeks has also been with protesters of different sectors, workers who feel that their wages are not equitable, who feel that they're being exploited, and therefore labour rights are also another critical area if a country is going to advance in terms of economic justice and social stability. But that means international brands also need to take responsibility, and so there's various dimensions of requiring rights to be promoted for Bangladeshis across the world, and not only within Bangladesh, and that includes labour rights for migrant workers, but it also fundamentally means addressing education, healthcare, social protection to improve access to an equitable development. It's about, as I mentioned, living wage for workers, and it's not only about ensuring all of those aspects, but it's also ensuring the quality of those services. If Bangladesh can reduce inequality, social mobility can also be improved, and people who go to work overseas can earn a better wage, and we'll have a more inclusive and resilient economy. And finally, one last area I wanted to touch on was around climate change. In addition to the protests over the summer, 18 million people between May and October were impacted by cyclones and floods across the country. And this has a huge impact on communities. And where rights come in, and we've just seen Baku ending, Bangladesh has contributed minimally to greenhouse gas emissions, but it's one of the countries that's most affected by climate change. So voicing our rights across globally, so that the 10 million Bangladeshis who are already impacted by displacement because of climate change can be supported, and there's equitable support to address flooding, riverbank erosion, and other climate impacts is key. That some of the people who lost their homes over the summer are really suffering unspeakable losses. 20% of them have lost nearly all of their income over the past months, and trying to find retribution in order to address the exacerbated poverty and social inequality is key in order to further advance. So just to maybe close by saying Bangladesh's progress in poverty reduction and human rights needs to continue to be sustained and strengthened. And there are many challenges, including climate change, displacement, and there really needs to be a holistic approach. The road ahead involves rethinking the growth model that prioritizes sustainability, resilience, and human dignity, ensuring no one is left behind as the country navigates its development trajectory. Thank you, Rashid.
Thank you very much, Gwen. Daniel, I will come to you in a while. We start with Bangladesh and we will end with Bangladesh. David, how do China built-in road projects impact local communities' right, and what can be done to mitigate these challenges in different parts of Africa, especially also in Pakistan? We have seen the situation in Balochistan where the local communities were complaining that their resource has been exploited. That can be true to a great extent. So what is China doing, and what can be done to mitigate these threats? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here a second time. And before I answer your question, if I can make 2 points. One is that I'd like to pay my respects to the people of Bangladesh and to the young people and their bravery in what Bangladesh has been through in the last few months. This is an extraordinary opportunity, I hope, for Bangladesh to chart its way into the future in a more inclusive way. And this is a lesson for all of us, that we each have our own journey to take, and it takes bravery and it takes the ability to think about how we better govern ourselves at a national level, because at the national level is where power resides, it's where decisions are made, and so the decisions that you make chart your future, and I think that goes for all of us. And I'd also like to make a second point as an Australian as well, as someone who might be considered to come from a very fortunate country. We often call Australia the lucky country, but actually even in a country like Australia, which is highly developed, the development process has of course disadvantaged and marginalised some people, and in particular my home state of Tasmania in Australia is a very good example to the world of how Indigenous people were completely destroyed. Their society was completely destroyed as a result of development. And why was that? It was because one group prioritised its rights above others. One group believed that it had all of the answers. And there were many good things about the development that occurred, but they were destructive to another part of the community because development was not inclusive and was not managed in an inclusive way. It took a long time in my home country. It took a couple of centuries before we started to acknowledge the dispossession of our Indigenous people, and before we actually started to try and find an inclusive way forward, and I'm not convinced we have even yet achieved that. So with that note, I want to just remark that every nation is on its own journey to a more inclusive and more successful form of human development. No nation has the perfect answer, and we all have to find a way that's culturally specific for us. And this is very interesting then when it comes to this question about the role of China as a financier of development. China very in a very short period of time, just in the last decade or so, has become a leading source of funds for development in the world. It was always doing so. It's not brand new. China has always played a role in providing funds for development, but in the last decade with this, as you say, this Belt and Road Initiative, China has put a brand on it, and China actually has, we could argue, a comprehensive plan for how it wishes to fund development across the developing world, and it's reaching as far away as Africa and to South America and to the Pacific Islands and of course in particular in Asia, in Eurasia. And so it's a very important question for us to grapple with, I think, to understand what the dynamics are of what's going on here. China as a rising power has the capacity, the financial capacity to fund significant development in the world, and it has built this into its identity as a rising power. So within the developing world, for governments, for leaders of countries, China becomes a very attractive partner because it is offering finance. It's offering finance sometimes at a more competitive rate than the private sector can, not always at a more competitive rate than the other multilateral agencies, but sometimes China will fund projects that the other agencies won't. So for example, through the neoliberal experiment of the last few decades, the IMF and the World Bank stopped lending for infrastructure development. And this was disastrous in the developing world. As we know, in Asia in particular, there's a huge infrastructure deficit. And Japan was addressing this with the Asian Development Bank, but China, when it came to the developing world with a set of new institutions such as the Asian Infrastructure Development Bank, but more importantly actually its bilateral lending agencies, the China Development Bank and the Exim Bank, the Export-Import Bank of China. When China brought around $1 trillion to the table and was able to fund infrastructure projects, this was a very attractive option to many countries across the developing world, to the leaders and to governments. And I want to stress that because I think my point about every nation finding its own way, well, at the end of the day, we are guided by our governments, and some of us have the potential to elect those governments and some of us do not, because we have different political systems across the world. And so in each case that I've studied across the Belt and Road Initiative, and I've looked in detail at quite a few projects, from very good high quality projects to some very poor quality projects. And in each case that I've looked at, I've found the reason for the variance is at the national level. It tends to be not because of the source of funding, but actually what is happening on the ground at the local level of governance. Is the local level a level that is captured by particular interests? Is there corruption? Is there a deficit of capacity to plan and to deliver infrastructure projects well? And what actually are the strategic objectives? How well does an infrastructure project align with the development, the broader development plan for an individual country? Let me give you two examples from the Pacific Islands, the region of the world that's close to my home country of Australia, and I used to represent the Pacific Islands Forum in China, so I was a close participant in the development of Belt and Road projects for the Pacific Island countries. In one case, in Samoa, which is relatively well governed, a transparent and accountable system of governance. In Samoa, a large, significant project for a small country, a large road project was delivered by Chinese companies under the brand of the Belt and Road. Chinese finance, Chinese workers were brought in to deliver the project, and it was transparently governed by a committee established by the government of Samoa, and it was accountable to the parliament. And the project was delivered on time, on budget. It was a very successful infrastructure project. In Tonga, next door, another Pacific Island country that allow me as an individual citizen to say perhaps not as well governed as its neighbouring country, a similar project similar project, Chinese finance, Chinese workers, Chinese companies to build a road project in Tonga. What happened? The money got diverted to the king, and the king had a beautiful new extension to his palace that was built with the money. Now, can we generalise about the Belt and Road Initiative from these kinds of projects? I don't think so. I think the real lesson here is that we really need to look at how can governments develop the capacity and the will to implement these kind of projects well, because infrastructure development is a key input into the development process. But of course, if the infrastructure development is corrupted and is at the local level, ends up diverting funds away from funding development and towards lining the pockets of individuals or oligarchic interests, as we see across many countries, then the Belt and Road Initiative is failing. Now, China is not a country that has its own transparent, accountable system of addressing these issues. So within China itself, the Belt and Road Initiative is, if you like, a propaganda initiative. It's all talked about in positive terms, that China extends the hand of friendship to developing countries and helps to fund infrastructure. So those of us outside of China, I think, need to look project by project at what's actually going on the ground. What are the factors that are leading to well-governed projects? What are the factors that are leading to failures? And as I say, in my experience, the diversity of experience is because of the diversity of governance. So it all comes back to what you good people of Bangladesh have just been through, this whole question of how do we get our countries well governed? How do we build ourselves, and only we in each of our own countries can do this, how can we ensure that our path to development, our journey to development is one that delivers for people, and in particular, as I say, that is inclusive of the needs of all of our people. Even next door in Myanmar, I had a look at the Belt and Road projects there. Even in a country as dysfunctionally governed as Myanmar, a place with an appalling civil conflict, a place with human rights problems, with development problems, poor governance over many decades, with a very short reform period that unfortunately came to an end. Even in Myanmar, the Belt and Road projects, we can look at them and we can see that actually the Myanmar government has very firmly been in control of them. It has not been China in control, it's been Myanmar determining, for example, that the Myitsone Dam project did not go ahead as a result of protests. So that was actually a responsiveness to the people, which was quite interesting to see that process in the reform years. But more recently, the Jiapu Port project, which is a very important project for China to give it access to the Bay of Bengal, but we've seen the agency of the Myanmar government there in reducing the scale of it, in being in control of the process of appointing people to manage the project itself. The share of the Myanmar control of that project has been increased at the local level. So even in a dysfunctionally governed place, national agencies should not be ignored. In fact, we should, I think, be focusing on the potential for national agency to be strengthened and to be better utilised and better focused, rather than, and I hope I'm getting my message across, rather than the geopolitical messaging that just paints everything about the Belt and Road as being bad, or the Chinese message, everything about the Belt and Road Initiative is good. You know what, it's more complicated than that, and I think we actually, if we focus on the development needs of people in the developing world, we need these infrastructure projects, but we need them to be well governed.
Many thanks, David. Sheikh Mohammed Daniel, what role can private sectors initiatives like life insurance and financial inclusion play in supporting sustainable development and equal rights for marginalized communities? Thank you.
Is that on? Okay. Thank you. Firstly, I would like to pay my respects to those who lost their lives in claiming democracy and democratic values back in Bangladesh. Me and my family and our company have been targeted by the previous regime. Of course, one of the reasons is that we supported Free Voice and we have partnered with Bay of Bengal for the past 3 years. So I would like to pay respects to them, to all those who have lost their lives. At the same time, I'd like to congratulate all the panel members for the wonderful discussion, and specifically to you for holding this. I think the human cost to development is a historical fact. It's something that no country, no region can ever deny. That's the first. If you look at the West, their development is at the back of either slave trade or colonizing the rest of the world. So that's always been there. But how do we make a more equitable future is something that we ought to survive and struggle for. In terms of Bangladesh, the marginal communities that we talk about, primarily from an economic perspective, are the ones who have not done well or not been part of the growth story of Bangladesh over the last couple of decades. If you look at the COVID pandemic situation, as mentioned earlier, a lot of families definitely went below the poverty line. And this is where life insurance has a major task to play in a country like Bangladesh. We do not have a welfare state like many of our well-to-do neighbors. But in such a context, what I've seen in my past 10 years in this industry is that if a bread earner of a family ceases to exist or does not have the ability physically to earn the money for the family goes below the poverty line. That is a major problem in countries like Bangladesh, where we are trying to elevate millions of people above the poverty line. And this is where the absence of state welfare programs really affects. And I believe that life insurance sector in Bangladesh has a long way to go, and there is a massive opportunity. We are currently, I think we have targeted about 0.4% of the population, if I'm not mistaken. But going forward, we feel, as part of my company, drive for the past couple of years has been to engage more people, not only in understanding what insurance does, but also to elevate people out of poverty. And we have been successfully, we've been doing that for the past couple of years, and partially one of the reasons why we were targeted by the previous fascist regime. However, I'm also involved with the garments industry, and I was listening wonderful discussion on the palm oil industry in Malaysia. And I would like to bring one thing into this discussion, is that when we look at a parameter set by the West, it is not always accurate, whether it is the palm industry in Malaysia or the garments industry in Bangladesh. Back in the 90s, my father-in-law was the president of BGMEA, and at the time there was a concern that there's child labor in this industry, which invariable, it was everywhere in every industry across the globe, but garments industry was particularly targeted. What the industry did immediately was to make sure every child was rehabilitated, schools were set up, and they were provided free education. And today we can proudly say that we do not have a single child labor working in the garments industry. But against that, have the West, or our primarily the Western buyers, increase the prices of the garments they procure. If you want an equitable society, everything must be equitable. If you want fair wages, fair prices must be ensured. Now, when we talk about climate change, the highest investment made by the garments industry in Bangladesh over the past 5 years is, other than safety and security of the structures, is actually going green. We have set up more solar panels in garments industry than any other industry anywhere in the world. And yet our prices don't go up. And when we look at the same garments, if a t-shirt is manufactured in Bangladesh today by Walmart, I won't take the names, but any buyer that manufactures a t-shirt in Bangladesh today is going to pay $3, is going to pay $7 in Vietnam. So that kind of disparity and that kind of differences and unfair in prices will always create an economics where somebody has to take the blunt for it. Eventually the manufacturer is going to take the blunt for it, and the manufacturer is going to squeeze down on the labor. So if you want an equitable society, let's build an equitable society. Let's not pretend that there is a golden rule that whenever the West says that their parameters are something that we need to stick by, that is the only rule. We need to understand the democracy, we need to understand the ground reality, we need to understand the people's will, and we also need to understand where the economy is headed. So for instance, Bangladesh, in garments industry, we have about over 4 million workers working in this industry. So 4 million families have been already elevated from the below poverty line to a certain standard of living. Now, if you do not consider that to be a success, where primarily the workforce is women, women empowerment is there. If you do not consider that to be success, then I guess we need to understand what success is from a Western perspective. And finally, regarding the change that we see, I wanted to bring this up just before I finish up, that the change that we see today, I witnessed our chief advisor 2 days ago in the same podium where he said, please criticize me. This is the change I think the youth has brought to this country, and I hope going forward that this hope that we have given to us by the youth of this country will be able to protect this. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let me slightly shift this discussion toward the human right about which the world is bragging. But the recent event has shown that the language of human right is selectively applied. The global hypocrisy that allows some lives to be more valuable than others, must be challenged. Look at Gaza, for example, a place where, the consequences of disregarding the human right have reached a devastating scale. Gaza, which was once described as open-air prison, is now converted to an industrial scale slaughterhouse and a site of profound suffering for humans. Tyrants, Netanyahu, who is born to terrorize the world, is saying that he will rebuild Gaza. But what about the lives, the hundreds of thousands of lives that have been killed, the babies, the children that are burned alive? And we have all seen all those videos circulating on social media. And this reminds us, that the principle of human rights is declining on a global scale. In certain nations, generously sponsoring them, and at the same time they are lecturing, let's say the Taliban or Iran, that they should respect human rights. But I don't understand the logic. If you are sponsoring a genocide, killing of babies, on the other hand, you are, giving lecture to people to send those women to education. And the Taliban responded to that first, we should live. This right is more important than sending women to education. I'm not saying that the Taliban are doing a great job. They are also doing a terrible job when it comes to, women education and the restriction on women. My point here is the hypocrisy. The West supports if a woman get naked in Iran, they will point out that look at the human rights situation there. But they will never, blame Israel for violating the human rights there. So my question to the panelists, this is a very open question, and I would like to mention that everyone can contribute just for 1 minute, not more than that, since we are coming to the end of conversation. Why has the international human rights system failed to protect not only Palestinians, but all other people who are still, in the need of human rights, be it Africa, be it Afghanistan, be it any community? Why has this decline so unprecedented recently, and why the international community is not doing anything? We will start with you, Ms. Qamaruddin. Thank you.
Irfan, Alhamdulillah. Actually, Irfan, when it was September 11 incident, I was in Afghanistan to provide the humanitarian aid to Afghanistan. And also, I've been to Gaza. Yeah, I've been to Gaza. And I've met up with the ladies, and they're so very empowered. The ladies in Gaza, basically, they are well educated, the mothers. They are well educated, they're so empowered. So while during times of war, they run the schools, they run the communities, and they organize activities for the communities. Yeah, and they also do chicken rearing, farming, and that kind of thing. You see, and when I visited Gaza at that time in 2009, I think. So it is a very developed country actually. They have university for women there, and the beaches were so beautiful. And I was thinking that if they were given a chance to lead a normal life, they could have been more progressive than most of us here actually. So, but it's too bad that they've been now being, what should I say, all this massacred by these Israeli attacks, which I think is not at all should be condoned with, because even though if you say that you are retaliating back whatever to the amount of, it doesn't tantamount to this type of level of massacre where thousands of children and women died, and not only the Palestinians or the Gazanians that is killed, but doctors that come to give aid, journalists come to give aid, the volunteers,
UN colleagues.
yeah, UN colleagues, yeah, they were also killed in this Gaza massacre. So therefore, I think the international community should stand up because of the UN stand. Sorry, there's a UN stand, there's a UN rep here, where they give veto power to 3 superpowers to overrule the decision of the other countries, which amount to I think 100 over countries in the world. So what is this? So the 100 countries of the world should go and stand up and say that, hey, we are hundreds of us here, there are only 3 of you there, so why are you taking this stage, as though the world belongs to you? So I think this should be stopped, the war should be stopped, especially the killing of the children and the women, and all of us here, I think, supported in my country, Malaysia also supported the stand that we should condemn the attack of Israelis on Palestine and Gaza, and I think we should allow them to progress and let them live their life, to the fullest. Thank you.
Any other panelists would like? Thank you very much. Would like to add any remarks? Just 1 minute or maximum 2. Maybe Gwen.
Sure. No, I mean, I think this is a question we're all grappling with in terms of what's happening in Gaza. I spent almost 10 years of my life working in Palestine, so it's an issue that's very close to my heart. And as you mentioned already, close to 200 UN colleagues have already been killed over the last year. I wouldn't say, however, that the human rights system has failed. I think that's probably not accurate. I think it's a political failure, and I think there's a hypocrisy in international politics that's really clearly has been spelt out, I think, in the past months. I think everybody is entitled to participate, to contribute, to enjoy economic, social, cultural, and social rights, and that's something that we should all fight for in every country. And I have to say it's been really an honor and a privilege to be here over the past months and to see young people fight for their rights in this country and for them to be heard and listened to. I know there was a huge loss of life and injury to many, but really fighting for those fundamental freedoms is really key, and I can really feel in Bangladesh a sense of hope and opportunity for the future, that we're all responsible for supporting and really helping advance in the coming months and years.
Thank you very much. Any other remarks that can be added? Sure. Just 1 minute, please.
Yeah, I think when we see conflict, when we see it in the Middle East, we see it in Africa, we see it in Europe, conflict is absolutely when everything breaks down, and this is where we see the very worst abuses. Obviously, it's a statement of the obvious, but it means that actually, if we can prevent conflict, that's how we can provide the conditions for successful human development. And we've tried this. The best will in the world existed there after World War II to establish the United Nations system, the multilateral system, and the concept behind it was to try and prevent conflict, because if you can prevent conflict, everything else can at least be given the conditions to take place. And sadly, from the very beginning, the multilateral system was neutered. it had no capacity to operate according to the best will in the world because of the Cold War. We divided into a binary, and double standards became the lingua franca. This was the way the whole system operated. If you were on one side of that Cold War divide, you looked at everyone else on the other side as being the enemy, and that's where all the human rights abuses were, that's where all the criticism was directed. And if someone was on your side and they were abusing human rights, you protected them, and you didn't actually deal with the issue at all. And we see the hangover of the 20th century problem still today, in that the double standards in the discussion around these issues is just so much staring us in the face.
Yeah.
And so I think our challenge, and there's no easy answer to this, but I think our challenge as a new world order takes shape in the 21st century, we are heading into a multipolar world. We don't yet know what exactly that will look like, but it's unlikely to be a binary like the Cold War. It's certainly unlikely to be a unipolar world like the last 3 decades. And somehow in a multipolar world, we have to somehow grapple with getting back to that question. How do we prevent conflict? And how do we actually provide the conditions for better human development that's equal, or at least equal opportunities for people? Maybe multipolarity can make us think about equality and human rights in a different way than the double standard that the binary has set in almost in stone.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. It's a very loaded question, and this 1-2 minute discussion certainly cannot justify. Any last minute, any point that you would like to hit, Ishrat?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe 50 seconds and 50 seconds.
Yeah, I just want to quickly respond to the broader question you posed, why human rights as a concept has not taken hold in the international system. And I think the reason for this, one of the reasons, is that there is this fundamental divide within the international order about what human rights actually means. Sometimes it is seen as an imposition, like concepts like democracy. And in many parts of the world, the word human rights does not conjure up the same image that it might conjure up in other parts, like for the developed countries. I give you one example. I worked for a few years in Myanmar, and apparently in Burmese language there is no translation of human rights. So in order to explain what it means to people, they have to use different combination of words just to explain the concept. So I think this also brings forward the idea of these Asian values that kind of came at the same time. So I think, these are the broader reasons why I think human rights kind of didn't take off as a concept.
Thank you very much. Daniel, maybe just very briefly, since we are getting late.
I think I don't really have an answer for you, but I rather have more questions. I do not understand why there is hypocrisy. Because when my 10-year-old asks me why people are being killed in Gaza like animals, I do not have an answer for him. So I do not understand that why there's a genocide in Ukraine but not a genocide in Gaza. I do not understand that.
Yeah, totally. Certainly. Thank you. Very legitimate question that we all can think about, and I think the answers are very clear. Mostly it comes from, political issues that these countries have, their national interest. But after all, we are all humans, and I feel even if you are the highest official of government, one day you will lose your chair. So don't leave a legacy, that history will remember. Ladies and gentlemen, since we are very near toward the lunch, and I'll take 4 questions. So if we can start from sir here, and then we will go there. Very briefly, please. Very briefly.
Wait.
I think it worked. Yeah.
Hello.
It works.
Thank you very much. My question is Mr.
Can you please speak a bit louder?
Kamaruddin, for commodity point of view, commodities. It's a sideline question. You know, the Bangladesh is a very emerging country in nowadays. We need so many commodities, but at this moment we are now.
Can you please, if I may, can you please
Hello.
speak a little bit louder?
Hello.
Yes, yeah.
The commodities needed in our country, so many the price is now uprising. Malaysia can help us in lot because of the palm oil. The 31 lakhs tons per year we are consuming in different types of oil, vegetable oil. Palm oil can help to reduce the prices of the vegetable oil. So we need. My question is that then Malaysia can help the credit line, commodity credit line, as well as the market possibility, market mechanism. How can you help from the Malaysian point? You please.
Okay, thank you. The question is taken. We'll take questions and then respond. The gentleman behind you, if you don't mind, he was first. Yes, sir. Yeah, thank you very much.
Assalamu
And then I'll
alaikum.
come to you later.
My name is A.L.M. Fazlur Rahman. I'm a retired Major General of Bangladesh Army. I want to apprise the August gathering, also our foreign friends. Why insurgency in Chittagong Hill Tracts? I'm mentioning it because,
Can you please speak louder?
because the Ishrad Hussain mentioned about Chittagong Hill Tracts. And she said that in the 60s, the Kornopuli Power hydroelectric project was constructed and many hectares of lands were submerged. You see, during Pakistan time, this hydroelectric project was built, but there was no insurgency in Chittagong Hill Tracts. It emerged in 1973 after the liberation of Bangladesh. Now my question is, why insurgency in CST? I served in Hill Tracts as a battalion commander thrice. I have studied, seen our brothers in Chittagong Hill Tracts. They are excellent people. They are fine, very humble, very religious.
Your question is well noted, sir.
There cannot be insurgency there. Now what happened is, during Pakistan time, the Indian insurgents were trained by Pakistan Army in Chittagong Hill Tracts. The India created Chittagong Hill Tracts problem by the people of Chittagong Hill Tracts as an extended security hands to flash out their insurgents from Bangladesh. And because of that, the
Thank you, sir.
Mizo
I will
problem-
have to shamelessly interrupt.
Okay,
Sorry.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
These are the main problems. And when in 1997, the
We
treaty
gotta
was
move to
signed,
the next question,
treaty was
please.
signed, the insurgents came from India and they surrendered their weapons. So it is the Indian created problem. For that we are bleeding for 36 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The lady here, please.
Hello everyone, I'm Abida Farzana. I'm currently working as a researcher in Bangladesh Institute of Peace and Security Studies. I had a question for Daniel, that is, Western companies like H&M and GeoFresh, who are having partnership with BGMEA, especially in carbon emission project. And H&M recently reported that 30% carbon reduction will be done with the partnership of BGMEA. Yet government workers continue to earn very little, as 95% $95 per month, which is well below living wages and goes against the goals of sustainable development goal.
Thank you.
So how can domestic and international corporations reconcile their environmental initiative with their responsibility to address the systematic labor exploitation in their supply chain?
Okay, thank you very much. One last question and then we will get to very
Good afternoon,
briefly.
everyone. I am MD Mamun Mia. I am a student of sociology from Haji Muhammad Danan Science and Technology University, Nagpur. My question is a little bit different outside of our discussion, but it's a great relevance in our discussions. MDG and SDG theories, the term introduced by USA, and they were highly concerned about the human rights, but their activities was on profit maximizing to buy arms.
What's your question, please?
Sir,
Get it
on
shortly.
30 seconds, please. USA support Israel to destroy their humanity. My question is open. My question is, the characteristics of USA, they talk about the SDG and humanity, but they are support to destroy humanity and other countries. What is your comment about the USA activities?
Okay.
Am I clear?
I'm not really sure.
So I asked you, the characteristics of USA, they talk about the humanity and SDG, but the prominent partner of introduced the SDG, but they support to destroy humanity and other countries. What's your comment about the USA activities?
Thank you very much. We'll try to, okay, anyone from the speaker who would like to respond to your respective questions very briefly, since we have only 2 minutes. Maybe first we can start. Bangladesh Malaysia can help the credit line.
I can respond to this commodity question just
Yeah,
now,
very briefly,
Alright,
please.
Okay, so I didn't get your name, yeah, but anyway, I think I'm more willing to share with you. But I think the last government, they were trying to introduce subsidized palm oil to the B40, to the lower income group of Bangladeshi. So we are working on that plan actually. So I hope the new government will take up this project so that it will benefit the poor people of Bangladesh to consume at the palm oil at a subsidized price. So is there anything else that you would like to ask me? You can meet me later, right? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Daniel?
Yes. So there's two parts to that question, if I understand it correctly. First is about the wage. So I think the wage that has been mentioned was the previous minimum wage, which has now risen to about $105. But even the minimum wage is not the average wage. The average wage is much higher than that, because even at that wage, I'd be lucky to even hire 100 workers. I will not be able to hire any worker whatsoever. We're looking for skilled workers, and of course the skilled workers' wages are much higher than that. However, that does not mean that this salary should not rise. I don't believe that me as an entrepreneur or anyone else who's into garments industry in Bangladesh would not like to see the wages rise. But at the same time, what I mentioned earlier, it should be equitable. The economics must work. And for that to happen, companies who are placing orders in Bangladesh must understand both the standard of living, the cost of living, and accordingly adjust the prices. If the prices are not adjusted, somewhere that money needs to come out. Either it has to be subsidized by the manufacturer. In that case, the manufacturer goes out of business in a couple of quarters. Otherwise, it has to be subsidized by the government. If the government does that, fantastic. If not, we need to find the money somewhere else. So the economics must work. So I'm really sick and tired of these companies. They come up, when they visit us as manufacturers, when the brands come and visit us, there's two teams that comes in. So the world needs to know. There's two teams that comes in. First team will come in and they will ask the world from you. They will say, oh, you know what, put air conditioning in your factory, put the solar panels up, give everything. Fantastic, I don't mind giving everything. But the second team that comes in is going to say, you need to reduce another 95 cents on the piece.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, how are you going to afford everything? This is not a magical world where I create money out of thin air. If that was the case, I would have done that. But that's unfortunately not the case. So either the brands need to really pay up, or somewhere down the line, somewhere down the supply chain, something needs to be squeezed.
Thank you. I think I got signal, to wrap up this session. But friends, if you have questions and if those questions were not answered, I think you can catch our speakers during the lunch, and they will be happy, I hope, to answer your questions. So thank you very much, and let me once again thanks my distinguished panelists, for joining this conversation, and a big round of applause. Thank you.